What's up, everybody? Tara Wellman here, and I hope you are ready for some late nights as the Cardinals head to the West Coast for the first time this year to take on the San Diego Padres for 4 games. 2009 was the last season in which the Padres won more than 80 games. That year they won 90 and finished second in the NL West. The next best finish since then was 2014. That year they went 77 and 85 and finished third in the division. The rebuild has been kind of slow and painful, as now manager Andy Green has tried to work with less than stellar rosters as he waits for reinforcements from their developing farm system. And yet over the offseason, the Padres did the thing you do where you bring in expensive, formerly productive veteran players to, I guess, mentor the young talent. It's a work in progress, and by all accounts, this year is when San Diego should maybe start to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. But have they? Chris Bauer is here to answer that question and more as the Cardinals head to their first trip out west. Well, Chris, first of all, thanks for joining me from hopefully sunny California. How is it there in San Diego these days?
Yeah, it's sunny. I feel like I feel like when you talk about Southern California weather, I have to say it does rain sometimes. Like people seem to think it's 100% sunny all the time, every time. We get like 30 days of rain a year, so if you come and visit, there's a good chance it'll be sunny, but don't be too surprised if it's rainy. But yeah, today it's actually been sunny and like 72 and beautiful. So
Listen, it was snowing here about 2 weeks ago, so I'll take 30 days of rain a year if that's the worst it gets.
oh yeah, I'm not complaining by any means. I'm just saying it happens.
Maybe not always sunny in Southern California, but nonetheless, the Cardinals are on their way to San Diego to take on the Padres for the first time this year. So let's sort of start with where the Padres are at in this sort of process in sort of getting back to, one of the top teams in the division. I feel like the expectations this year were still probably pretty low, but there are a lot of things to look forward to. So when you look at this first month or so, are you seeing more or less or pretty much what you expected from the Padres?
Terry, I think you summed it up pretty well. The expectations were low, but it was also kind of a weird offseason because the Padres made one of the biggest acquisitions in their history, signing Eric Hosmer. So it didn't seem like they were ready to come out of this rebuild that they're in, but they also kind of acted like they were ready. They signed Eric Hosmer. That was a huge deal. Other fan bases, I don't know if they get used to these kinds of big signings, but it doesn't seem like it's as big of a deal as it is in San Diego when it happens because it's just so rare. So they signed Hosmer, and that was really huge. And they also traded a young player, a young pitcher, Eniel De Los Santos, to the Phillies for a 1-year rental. So sure, it seems like they're still rebuilding, but they're also acting like they're not rebuilding. So kind of strange. But I think the first month or so of the season has played out about as you might expect, ignoring those two moves that I just made. They're not playing like they're ready to compete this year. I think there's an old baseball adage that says when Clayton Richard is your opening day starter, you're probably still rebuilding. So I think there's a lot of position players who are probably looking like they could be a member of the next great Padres team, but in terms of the rotation, not so much.
I'm glad you said that the offseason was a little strange because from an outsider's perspective, that's exactly what I thought of the
Yeah,
Padres offseason. I mean, I
yeah.
saw them start to make those moves and I went, "Wait, hold on. Like this season? That's where you're going
Hmm.
with this season?"
Right.
It seemed like it was a little ahead of maybe where the rest of that process was. But you mentioned Hosmer. Let's sort of start there because he did come in as a huge acquisition for the Padres. Um, when you look at a guy like that has that sort of veteran status, coming in on a pretty significant contract. What does he bring to a team that's at this stage of that rebuilding process?
Well, it's hard to say. I think a lot of what we were told he brings, that like leadership quality, is something that we were told to expect from Will Myers too.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit strange in that regard as well. When the Padres rebuilt after that 2015 attempt at contention, they held on to Will Myers, and the idea was he was going to be this leader for all of the young players who they got back during that rebuild process, who would slowly grow with the team. And then they come and they sign Eric Hosmer to do what seems like kind of the same thing. So a little bit of confusion there on our end. But hopefully, Eric Hosmer is the guy who works with young players. There's some rumors about Padres clubhouses in the past that weren't the most helpful, whereas the older guys, instead of helping the younger players, might laugh at them when they don't do well, or maybe be not the kind of teammates that you want to have. And I think that's the idea behind signing Eric Hosmer, is he's going to help the young players and also teach young players that they need to help the next group of young players.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It just, like I said, it felt like a very strange sort of choice for this offseason. But everything that I see indicates that he is sort of being that guy, and he is really stepping into that role, whether it was supposed to be for Will Myers or not. And there are a lot of talented young guys that he's having the opportunity to play with this year. The Padres just had an opportunity to play a series in Mexico. We've seen some of that, of course, the series at the beginning of the year in Puerto Rico, promise of a series in London next year. In Mexico, Christian Villanueva was one of those guys that had an opportunity to play, and it was a cool opportunity. I love that we're seeing some of these guys have an opportunity to showcase their talent where it all started for them, and he's one of those guys.
Yeah, Christian Villanueva has been a huge, pleasant surprise for us. He he fits the mold of some of the kinds of players that AJ Preller has acquired, in that what we call post-type prospects. So at one point they were big type prospects, and then perhaps something didn't work out immediately for them, and AJ Preller's made a bit of a habit of acquiring those types of players. Another one was Drew Pomeranz. That certainly worked out well for the Padres. So Christian Villanueva was a big prospect. I think he started with the Rangers, and that makes sense, being as AJ Preller also was with the Rangers and might have had something to do with that acquisition there, or at least getting to know him. And then he went to the Cubs, then he came to the Padres, and he's been a real pleasant surprise. That's the kind of thing that a rebuilding team needs to be doing, is giving those players who might not have chances in other clubs, like the Cubs, an opportunity to play and see what we have. And so far, Christian Villanueva has shown a lot of power, a lot of pull power. The patience, not quite so much, but hopefully as he matures, that batting, or that eye improves, and the patience and on base percentage hopefully comes around. But even still, a player from a third baseman with that kind of power, it's a fun player to have. And like you sort of touched on, playing in Mexico, the Padres right here are next to Tijuana. We have a lot of Mexican Americans in our community, and Mexican players certainly connect with them. So it's cool to have.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch the reactions of the players and of the fans who get to see those major league games right in their backyards, for some of them for the first time. So that's been cool. You mentioned that Villanueva has been better than advertised. One of my Twitter followers actually made a comparison. For the Cardinals several years back, they had Jeremy Hazelbaker that they didn't start in the Cardinals organization, but he ended up in their minor league system, came up and made the club out of spring training and shocked everyone, and then led the team in home runs and just had all this extra base power, and it came out of nowhere. He wasn't the youngest guy, but he was kind of that journeyman that had made his way through the minor leagues, kind of waiting his turn, and then got a chance. Now, it wasn't the most sustainable success, and he's moved on to a couple of other organizations now, and hasn't been able to recapture that magic that he had at the beginning of the year. Is there any indication that with Villanueva, it was just a matter of time before he got his real chance, and this is who he really is, or is this just sort of what he is now until the rest of the league adjusts?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. I think if I could answer that accurately, I might, work for a team. I will say he never really got a chance. This was his first time in the majors, so that says something about the perhaps more of a chance in the future. Um, Although, like I mentioned, the on base percentage, I think could be an issue as he starts seeing fewer pitches in the zone. Maybe pitchers start pitching to him more carefully. He's going to have to, change that approach, be a little bit more patient to make sure he gets his pitch.
Another young guy that a lot of baseball has been talking about this season, Franchy Cordero, is one of those guys that he's going to strike out a lot, but when he doesn't strike out, it's pretty special. It seems that he's also improving in that area as far as his approach at the plate, the pitches that he does swing at, making sure that he swings at something he can hit. He also is like top 10 in baseball in average exit velocity, so when he makes contact, it seems to work out pretty well for him. How much fun has it been to watch him as he's making that adjustment this year?
Super fun, and you really did your homework, Sarah. Yeah, French, you nailed it with Frenchy. He's one of those guys who's been in the Padres system for a long time. I feel like we've heard about him for years. He was originally a shortstop, but it's just such a demanding position defensively. The Padres moved him to center field. He has that great speed. He has that insane pop off the bat. You mentioned the exit velocity. He's also, I looked it up today, the fourth highest average home run distance in all of baseball is Franchy Cordero. Uh, if anyone out there has a subscription to The Athletic, one of my friends, Dustin Palmatier, has written about Franchy, I think once, at least, or maybe twice, looking at the exit velocity and what to expect from him. But yeah, that power is really exciting, really fun to watch. The speed, too. Power speed combination is great. The Padres have a crowded outfield, but I think at this point he's played his way into that starting role. If not at center field with Manny Margot, but in left or right, depending on Will Myers' injury and some other things.
I was going to ask you how he fits in because it's always fun to see someone that has that raw talent. The challenge is always how they can polish that and make it consistent. But then there are a lot of pieces that have to fall into place for someone like that to find themselves in the mix moving forward with the Padres. So I'm. Does it seem like he can be one of those core guys, or is it still too early to tell?
It seems like it. Power speed combo. That's awesome, baby.
Yeah.
He's had some. Well, the Padres outfield started very crowded. It's gotten less crowded now that Will Myers is hurt. The Padres, I think, lost a lot of confidence in Hunter Renfroe based on his patience at the plate last year. I don't think they liked his approach, so they're asking him to improve that. It was interesting with Hunter Renfroe. He was a first-round draft pick a number of years ago, and he seemed to have it all in the minors, but then when he came to the majors, it just didn't seem to click. He had that power, but there really weren't a lot of other skills that he could combine his power with. And Franchy Cordero has power, but he's also got a better defense, more speed, and like you mentioned, his approach I think has been improving. And I think if he keeps his strikeouts just a little bit lower than the way they've been, yeah, he could be a mainstay.
You mentioned Will Myers is out. Has that opened the door as an opportunity for someone else, or is it more hurting the Padres because Will Myers isn't playing? Is it not that it's ever a good thing for someone to be hurt, but is the silver lining to Will Myers being hurt the fact that you get a chance to see some of these other guys?
Yeah, well, Franchy Cordero is definitely the silver lining there. I think, there's not really a situation where a player being hurt is good. If the Padres thought Franchy Cordero deserved that spot over Will Myers, they should have just played Franchy Cordero over Will Myers. And even if it is crowded and Will Myers does perform, they can always trade one of those two. So we were really hoping for a full season from Myers this year. He's shown that tendency for injury. It hasn't been the same injury over his career. It's been different things. But seeing that again is a little unfortunate.
Tell me about this rotation and the sort of roller coaster that it is watching the pitching try to maybe match up to some of the position players as far as their ability any given day.
So the pitching is a bit of a different story in these 2018 Padres compared to the position players. As I mentioned, Clayton Richard was the Padres opening day starter. That says a little bit about their rotation. We got some bad news out of spring training. The best prospect of the Padres was basically a shoo-in at the top of the rotation. Dinelson Lamet went down for Tommy John surgery, which is something Padres fans have gotten unfortunately used to seeing from some of our prospects. I think it's common around baseball. It feels like it's more common for the Padres to see those pitching injuries. What do you think, Tara?
Well, as a Cardinals fan, I'm very familiar with pitchers going down with Tommy
Okay.
John surgery. Actually, the Cardinals are just tonight. Actually, was the first start for Alex Reyes, who was their top pitching prospect. Went down with Tommy John last year and hasn't pitched
That's
for a
right.
year. So, yeah, we're very familiar with especially early spring training bad news. I believe both Chris Carpenter and Adam Wainwright, and maybe one year Jaime Garcia, all went out in different spring trainings. They all went down for the year early on in the year. So I
Oh my
usually
God.
just like cross my fingers and pray that they make it through spring training and then they'll be okay.
It is so frustrating. It's one thing to watch even somebody who you expect to be a good pitcher or player to perhaps a big prospect or something, or maybe a big free agent signing come on board and just not perform based on your expectations. That's obviously heartbreaking, but I feel like a player being injured is just some big level of heartbreaking because it's not it's not expected. There's nothing you can really do about it. It seems like, right? It's
Yeah.
just like the person just disappeared off the face of the earth one
Yeah.
day,
And
and one day
inevitably,
they're there,
yeah.
not.
Inevitably, it seems like, I mean, with Reyes, he came up at the end of the season. He was a September call up, made a couple of starts, and everybody was like, this kid is the real deal. He's going to
Oh, it's
be
even worse. Oh man.
legit. And then, that was it. He went down in spring training the next year. So, yeah, it's
That's
horrible. It's horrible. You just get enough of a little glimpse of what they can be, and then it's just, I mean, the number of guys that go down with either an elbow or a shoulder these days, it seems like it's only a matter of time for just about everybody.
Yeah. Oh man. I wish there was something that anybody could do. I'm sure the teams have their research, their top scientists on the case, but
Yeah.
feels like it's been going on for a while, and it's so frustrating. So anyway, to Nelson Lamet, uh, the Padres' top-rated pitching prospect who was likely going to make the rotation went down. I say that because the Padres have other prospects who are probably higher ceiling than Lamet. Lamet's more of a maybe number 2 or 3 starter type player. Um, but he went down at spring training, so that left Clayton Richard as the opening day starter. The good news for the Padres is there are some other pitchers who are available. Maybe not quite that at that level as Lamet, but Joey Lucchesi and Eric Lauer are 2 Padres draft picks who made their debut this year. And they rely a little more on deception compared to stuff and speed like Lamet. But so far they've pitched well, they pitched capably. It's really nice having those kinds of players available when the Padres need them because they have such a good farm system. Guys go down, and then you have quality players like Lucchesi and Lauer available. So I'm not sure if you guys will see them in this next series. Looks like you're looking at Jordan Lyles on Thursday, Eric Lauer on Friday, so you'll see him, and then Tyson Ross and Clayton Richard.
Young guys coming into a rotation for the first time can always be a bit of an adventure. So with Lauer, the Cardinals will see him. He'll face off against, I believe it'll be Luke Weaver. The rotation for the Cardinals right now is a little bit weird. They're shuffling some things. Adam Wainwright may be coming back. He may not be coming back with all the off days. They don't really know who's going to start on Sunday. But I think it should be Weaver and Lauer in that second game of the series. And Luke Weaver is one of those guys for the Cardinals that is in a major league rotation for the first time for theoretically a full season. He started the year in the rotation. He came up last year and made a number of starts and did fine. He was probably the best Cardinals pitcher coming out of spring training, and he kind of hit a wall when he pitched in a couple of games against the Cubs, and has struggled here and there. But I think that's another young starter thing too. You know, they don't maybe adjust quite as quickly as everyone else. With Lauer, first of all, he's a lefty, which is kind of the Achilles heel for the Cardinals, so he's got that going for him.
That's good.
But what kind of an impression has he made in the limited time that you've seen him so far?
Well, his first couple starts, perhaps predictably, didn't blow the world away. He actually made his major league debut in Colorado, which was kind of just throwing him to the wolves. Yeah. And I think it was his second or third start, with the first inning, he gave up some runs, but at that point on Twitter, some of the Padres fans were ready to give up on him after like 6 innings in the majors, which I think describes Twitter pretty well. And then he recovered. He recovered nicely. I thought that first inning that he pitched, I wish I could remember who the opponent was, but he actually didn't give up that many bad pitches. It was just guys hitting good pitches far, which happens sometimes. I think as a young player, perhaps you have to make sure not to get frustrated when something like that happens, and he didn't. He went through it during that start that I saw, and ended up going another 5 innings after the first inning of giving up a few runs. He went like 4 or 5 more with no runs, and he's pitched well so far, aside from that. But like I said, he's one of those guys who's going to rely more on location, and less so much about velocity. He was one of the first picks from, let me see what draft class that was. It was a 2016 draft, so he made the majors quickly, and that was the shtick that kind of came with him when he was drafted. Was he was one of those pitchers who was polished, and then he would move through the system quickly, so that worked out well so far.
Yeah, the pitcher for the third game for the Cardinals, Michael Wacha, was similar. He was a guy that he made the major leagues like a year and a half, 2 years after he was drafted. He was a guy that in spring training had people going, wait a second, how long has he been pitching professionally? Because he just had a lot of really good stuff. He's struggled his last couple of starts. He's the kind of guy that he hasn't gone real deep in games because the pitch count just gets up there real quickly, and he hasn't been able to really replicate that early success that he had. He'll be going up against Tyson Ross, as you mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did he pitch? He threw a no-hitter like pretty deep into a game a couple weeks ago, right? I think I saw that was a Ross start. Is that something that you expect him to be able to, not necessarily replicate a no-hitter into the 8th inning, but that kind of ability? Is that what you expect out of him?
Yeah, he was a dominant pitcher for the Padres up until he kind of fell apart a couple years ago. And yeah, he has that stuff. That slider is just so unhittable. Again, there's an article in The Athletic by my friend Dustin Palmenter explaining a little bit about Tyson Ross's slider and how he uses it. He can put it in different places in the strike zone, either throw it out of the strike zone for a swinging strike or try to drop one in there on the back door. But yeah, he's got that top flight stuff. The velocity isn't quite there as it was in years past. That year no-hit bid that you mentioned, that was against the Diamondbacks. And I think he was at somewhere in the 110 pitch mark, 120 pitch mark, somewhere around there in the 8th. So his pitch count was high. It seemed like it would have been tough for him to pull off that no-hitter, which, by the way, no Padres pitcher has ever thrown a no-hitter, so it was pretty exciting for us to watch. probably mention that every time. Every time a no-hitter is discussed, the Padres have never thrown one. But I think out of this rotation, he definitely has the best chance of doing it this year.
So not the opening day starter, Clayton Richard, not the guy that you expect to throw a no hitter. What do you expect
Right.
from him?
From Richard?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. The Padres signed him to a 2-year extension last year, and he didn't play like the kind of pitcher you'd expect that from. I have a suspicion it was more of a clubhouse thing where the Padres have these guys they like having around, perhaps a little more continuity. A team like the Padres, goes through players I think more often than you might expect. So the idea with Richard was have some continuity, have a guy they like around in the clubhouse. Like same with Hosmer, I think the idea is teaching young players and then those young players learning how they were treated by these older guys and then replicating that. And then also something about basically reinforcing what it is that's being asked of them by management rather than hearing it from a manager or from an employee. If Richard is one of those guys who can perhaps relay that message that's being passed to them to the younger guys, they might be more willing to listen. So that kind of stuff. I'm not sure why the opening day starter thing happened though. I keep going back to that. It's just, when you're thinking about your expectations for a season, and Clayton Richard is your opening day starter, I feel like that should set them pretty well. I guess not all people feel that way, but
Yeah, so Carlos Martinez started opening day for the Cardinals. Adam Wainwright was slotted to get the home opener. And with the mix of pitchers that the Cardinals have this year in that starting rotation, Adam Wainwright's not one of the top two guys. There were a lot of reasons to think that maybe giving him that opening day start at home was definitely not because of his pitching ability, but similarly more about the career that he's had in St. Louis and all of that. So I'm very familiar with questioning opening day starters, whether it's the home opener or actual opening day. But like I mentioned, Adam Wainwright out again for the second time with injury. He could be back. That's sort of up in the air. It could be John Gant, who is one of the young Cardinals AAA starters that made a spot start in Adam Wainwright's last scheduled start. It could also be Carlos Martinez starting on regular rest because of the off days and where they fell, and then it would shift everyone. So I really don't know what they're going to do on Sunday. We did actually skip over game one of the series, which will be Miles Michaelis against Lyles, as you mentioned. Or the Cardinals radio announcer, Mike Shannon, kept calling him Lies the other day in previewing the series. So whatever you want to call him. Now, he's been in the bullpen. Is that right?
Yeah, he has been in the bullpen. Jordan Lyles is one of those pitchers I quite couldn't tell you that much about. I think of him just as more of like a generic pitcher. Like he's a guy who can throw like 90 miles an hour and who can take up a spot in the rotation, and we'll go from there basically.
Yeah.
Although I do have to point out that Miles Michaelis is a former Padre.
It's been a while, but yes.
That's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, he's been in Japan since then, and he's been great for the Cardinals this year. I mean, if there's one thing that's been maybe the biggest surprise from Cardinals pitchers this year, it's probably Miles Michaelis. He's been pretty spectacular and probably the most consistent of any of the 5 Cardinal starters. He doesn't maybe quite have the upside that someone like Carlos Martinez does. But man, if you need a guy that's going to go out there every 5 days and give you 7 innings, he seems like he can be that guy. Which is, to be honest, more than I gave him credit for when the Cardinals made that signing.
Yeah, well, he pitched well in Japan, didn't he? I think that was the cool story. Was went to Japan and pitched well. It was like, see, I got it. I can do this.
Yeah, and it's obviously the league is different there, and the way that pitchers go about their approach as starters is a little bit different. I think he's been able to. I don't think that always translates when you try to come back to the major leagues. I think he's been able to translate it very well and use what he learned as far as how to I mean, he changes things up very impressively. I mean, he's able to change speeds, he's able to locate with incredible accuracy. And he can, go from a 78-mile-an-hour curveball on the inside corner to just reaching back for a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. And no one saw that coming. That was not in the scouting report
Wow.
on Miles Michaelis,
Wow.
let me tell you.
Wow. Yeah, I don't remember hearing about that.
Yeah, we didn't either. And then all of a sudden, first couple of starts, we were like, wait, was that can't be right. 98? I didn't know he
Someone
had
check the gun.
98. Yeah. But he's been fun to watch. So, yeah, the pitching matchups could be interesting. I think that the Cardinals, if this week is any indication, tend to have a hard time with pitchers they haven't seen before. Which may be every team. I don't know. It seems like the Cardinals they almost got no hit by a kid making his major league debut last week. Um, so it seems to me like the Cardinals struggle more than anyone against pitchers they haven't seen before. But I don't know. Maybe the Padres do too.
I think that seems pretty common. Yeah.
When you look at this series coming up with the Cardinals, what do you want to see from the Padres, whether it's the guys in the lineup or the guys on the mound?
You know, at this point in the year, I don't think I'm going to break any Padres fans' hearts if I say, playoff chances are not looking great. So, well, the wins are fun. I think sometimes when you're looking at more big picture stuff and looking at, playoff rebuilding, those kinds of discussions, it becomes tempting to forget about how much fun wins are to watch. So I don't want to discount the Padres winning games because that's great and it's good. But what I would like to see, and I think what a lot of Padres fans are looking for, basically from here on out, is development from players we hope to be stars or at least contributors on the next great Padres team. So guys like Manuel Margot, Franchy Cordero, Joey Lucchesi, Eric Lauer. These are the guys who we're hoping are going to be around for a long time. So success for them. Not really Cardinals related, but we're a little bit concerned because Austin Hedges has an elbow injury, and if you plug in, take 10 days of rest into the Padres injury translator 5000, what that usually means is Tommy John surgery. So right now, Austin Hedges has unfortunately been sentenced to 10 days of rest for his elbow. Word is he was playing catch today, which is good news. But hearing him not have Tommy John surgery would be pretty good news as well.
So it's also not just the Cardinals that come up with these pretty lame explanations for injuries that then turn into season-ending injuries. Evidently, that's not just a Cardinals thing either.
Okay, that's good. That makes me feel better.
We've all sort of been joking this week, though. Not joking because of the injury. Yadier Molina went down with an injury that was horrifying over the weekend, and ended up having a surgical procedure done. Supposedly is out for 4 weeks. But 4 weeks in Yadier Molina terms is like a week and a half if he gets his way.
Okay.
So I was
Okay.
laughing about it today. He's supposed to be at home resting, right? Well, he didn't didn't allow them to send a wheelchair home with him from the hospital. Instead, he walked on his own out of the car and into his
Okay.
house. And then today,
Okay.
Yadi's notorious for, I don't know what the Instagram equivalent of subtweeting is, but he does it on Instagram. And so
Okay.
he posted an Instagram picture today of himself like in his house up walking down the hallway, and the caption was something about how it felt so good to be up walking again or something. And to me, that was his not so subtle way of being like, 4 weeks, I'll be fine.
Okay. Okay.
So the Cardinals
Okay.
have the two extremes where like the staff will be like, "Oh, he's got a mild contusion," and it turns out that he has like a broken arm or something. And then there's Yadier Molina, who
Yeah, yeah.
should be down for like a month and a half, and 4 days later he's like, "Guys, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't know what your problem is."
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that.
yeah,
Especially with catchers, they get banged up a lot. I'd be concerned. It's cool to hear about him just like willing his way into being healthy again, but at the same time, he's not a young guy. Hope you
no,
don't take offense to that. He's not a young
no,
guy. You want to be careful. You want to
yeah.
make sure he gets his rest.
I'm sure there will be plenty of people who who insist that he does not come back too soon.
Right, right. Yeah.
His brother Benji was joking with apparently some the doctors at the hospital or something, telling him they might have to handcuff him to the bed to keep him from just
Yes,
getting
do
up and leaving.
that. Do that.
And apparently take his phone away from him so he can't Instagram everything that happens in his life. Anyway, that is not really related to this at all. Just a very entertaining rabbit trail. That's all the questions that I really had for you, except that I do want to say I don't know that Padres fans are looking forward to seeing Jed Jerko because he seems to hit pretty well against the Padres. But that aside, what are the Padres fans' greatest memories of Jed Jerko when he was with the Padres? Or with his
I'm
brother,
so
Randy?
glad. I'm so glad you brought him up because do I have a story for you, Tara? When he was with the Padres, he was one of my favorite players. What I liked about him was he was somebody you might not expect to have big time power. He was a shorter guy. Didn't quite look like an athlete, and I think I've talked to his brother about that, so he wouldn't be offended if I said that. But he plays second base, but he has this huge power stroke, and how rare is that? How cool is that? I love that. Um, and the year the Padres traded him, I think that was the first year of StatCat's existence. And one thing that I did was I looked at his exit velocity at the time, like up to that year before when they had traded him. Uh, and it turned out that he had some of the better exit velocity in the league, or at least on the team. And at that point, not a lot of people were really talking about it, but to me, that said a lot about his potential because he hadn't played quite up to his potential in the majors at that point. So there were some Padres fans who were a little frustrated by it. But to me, just that potential of being a second baseman with big time power and showing it at least in exit velocity that people might not be paying attention to at that point. Um, it was a huge deal, and I was super disappointed when the Padres traded him, especially for a 1 year deal of John Jay. I didn't really understand that at all. It wasn't a year that the Padres were going to be in contention. Jed Jerko was the kind of guy who could help them when they were in contention. He can certainly help the Padres now. Um, so I was really disappointed by that. I'll always be a Jed Jerko fan. So I'm definitely a Padres fan too. So I guess I'm rooting against him when he plays the Padres. But there's still a part of me that wants to be like, dude, just stick it to him, Jed. They didn't
Yeah.
have faith in you, and I did, and they deserve it.
Yeah, he's a player that's easy to like. Although, if someone could tell Mike Matheny that he should play more, that'd be great. He missed some
Oh
time.
yeah, so what's the deal with that? He hasn't been starting every game, has he?
No, and the way that their infield mix has worked out this year, he wasn't ever really going to be starting every game. Um, really, because the Cardinals have this diamond in the rough in Jose Martinez, who is a bit of a liability defensively. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
So he can pretty
Okay.
much only play at first base. However, that's where Matt Carpenter was playing last year. They have Colton Wong, who has all the potential in the world to be a stud second baseman for them there. And so Jed was playing third base last year. And he did a great job of it. But when you plug Jose Martinez into the lineup every day, Matt Carpenter has to move somewhere else. So in theory, there was going to be this much more consistent mix of Jed Jerko and Matt Carpenter and Colton Wong, and Jose Martinez was probably not supposed to be the 3-hitter for this team when the season started, but that's sort of what he's become. So he's playing every day, and those other 3 guys have sort of had to figure it out from there. And unfortunately, Jedd Gyorko's gotten the short end of the stick on playing time. Now, he did miss some time with an injury at the beginning of the year, and has had a hard time regaining any consistency in playing time. But as far as why that's happening, your guess is as good as mine, because I have no idea. You mentioned Randy Gyorko, Jedd's brother. Right after Jedd came back after the injury, he hit his 100th career home run. And there were 2 other guys in the Cardinals everyday lineup that were at 99 career home runs, I think. And the very next day, Jedd was not starting. So Randy tweeted out something to the effect of, "Not starting the only guy in your lineup with 100 career home runs seems like a great plan." Then the next time Jedd played, he hit his 101st home run and didn't start the next day, which prompted Randy to tweet, "Starting everyone except the guy who has 101 career home runs seems like a great plan." So nobody gets it. No one really knows what the deal is with Jedd Gyorko not having more playing time. But what I can say is that he's made the most of the time that he has had, and his offensive numbers are as better than the guys he's playing behind right now, and that's why
they're video game numbers this year. They're just ridiculous.
I mean, it has been a much smaller sample size, just because he was hurt and he hasn't played that much. But nonetheless, when the guys playing in front of him have averages below 200, there's not a lot of explaining you can do to make sense of why he's not playing more often. But maybe he will in San Diego, simply because Mike Matheny really likes to play matchups. And Jedd's played pretty well against San Diego, so he might have that going for him. We'll see.
Yeah, the other thing about that too is, isn't it nice that he can switch back and forth between third and second base?
It is, and he's been great at both of those positions. There was some it's hard to believe that Twitter fans would pick one thing and not let it go ever. But there was, I know, shocking. But there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year that he should be the starting third baseman and Matt Carpenter should start at second base, and that Kolten Wong should be the odd man out. Kolten's actually playing better than a couple of the guys in the lineup right now, and he's far and away the most capable defensive player at second base that they have. But yeah, Jedd can handle it at second base or at third base without really missing a beat. And I think it's impressive for someone who can do that without the consistent playing time, so that they can just come in and not really, you don't feel like there's any drop off, and he doesn't have to play every day to maintain that level. So I think he should be playing more, but I don't get to make those decisions.
Well, you should. Call her in charge and put you in charge.
There we go. Well, we'll see what happens this weekend. One thing that will probably happen, although you have me less sure of this now, is that it will be sunny in San Diego. But now maybe it'll rain because we talked about it. Who knows? But whatever happens, it can't be worse than playing in the Midwest in April. So it's a win. Either way.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'll remember that. Let's all remember that.
Thank you for your time tonight. Thanks for chatting a little bit more about the Padres, and hopefully it's an exciting series this weekend.
Yeah, this is awesome, Tara. Thanks for having me.
After the Cardinals swept the Cubs at home, they then followed that up by closing out the homestand with 2 losses to the Minnesota Twins. A frustrating conclusion to an overall successful homestand where they went 5-2 and really made a case for why we should start to buy in. But the Padres are going to be a tough test. Maybe not the best team on paper, but a lot of ways that a lot of things can go right for the Padres and wrong for the Cardinals. Plus, that West Coast swing is always a bit of a crapshoot. We never really know what's going to happen. Thanks again to Chris for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes or Google Play or SoundCloud or wherever you listen to your podcast. Find the Birds on the Black one and subscribe to it, because I will be back next time for another series preview and more.